This story is titled, Sister Asked to Borrow My Phone for an Emergency Call. She mass texted all my contacts announcing I'm pregnant with her husband's baby because she saw us having coffee. My hands are still shaking as I write this. How could a simple coffee meeting spiral into such chaos? In just 24 hours, my entire family is turned against me. My phone won't stop buzzing with shocked messages, and my sister, my own sister, has destroyed my reputation with a single vengeful lie. The worst part? She did it using my own phone, claiming it was for an emergency call. I never imagined Jessica, 28F, could be capable of such cruelty, especially over something so innocent. I'm Rachel, 25F, and until yesterday, I had what most would consider a normal life. I worked as a kindergarten teacher, lived in a cozy apartment in Boston with my rescue cat Luna, and maintained close relationships with my family. My sister Jessica was always the more dramatic one, the one who needed to be the center of attention at every family gathering. When she married Michael, 30M, 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy for her, even though he seemed too good for her sometimes. Michael was different from Jessica's usual type. He was kind, stable, and genuinely cared about our family. As her sister, I made an effort to welcome him, often including him in family events and getting to know him as a brother-in-law. We all lived within 20 minutes of each other, which meant frequent family dinners at our parents' house. Tom, 55M, and Linda, 53F. Those dinners were a tradition none of us dared to miss, especially since Mom's cancer scare last year brought us even closer together. Everything was fine until last Tuesday. Michael reached out to me, asking if we could meet for coffee. He sounded worried, and as his sister-in-law, I agreed without hesitation. Looking back, maybe I should have told Jessica about it immediately, but it seemed so innocent at the time. What could possibly go wrong over a cup of coffee? That coffee meeting would become the catalyst for a series of events that would tear our family apart. If only I had known what Jessica was capable of when she asked to borrow my phone yesterday, claiming her battery had died and she needed to make an urgent call to her doctor. The look in her eyes. I should have seen it wasn't desperation, it was pure rage. But to understand how everything imploded so spectacularly, you need to know what Michael told me during that coffee meeting and why Jessica's reaction went far beyond simple jealousy. The truth is, he shared something with me that day that would change everything. Something that made Jessica's vengeful text seem almost rational in her twisted mind. The coffee shop was quiet that Tuesday afternoon. I remember fidgeting with my cup sleeve as Michael sat down across from me, looking more troubled than I'd ever seen him. His usual confident demeanor was replaced by something I'd never witnessed before: vulnerability. That should have been my first warning sign that this wasn't going to be a typical conversation between in-laws. Michael hadn't touched his coffee. Instead, he kept running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I'd noticed over the years. He began by telling me something that made my stomach drop. Jessica had been acting strange for the past few months. At first, I thought this was heading toward a typical marital problem discussion, but what he revealed next left me speechless. He had found pregnancy tests in their bathroom trash, multiple tests, all positive. Under normal circumstances, this would be cause for celebration. But Michael's voice cracked as he told me that they couldn't be his. They had been trying for a baby for 2 years, and 6 months ago, they had learned he was infertile. The doctors had been absolutely certain about the diagnosis. My mind was racing. Was my sister having an affair? Was this why she'd been so distant lately, missing 2 family dinners in a row, something she'd never done before? I felt sick thinking about how this would destroy our parents, especially Mom, who was still recovering from her health scare. But there was more. Michael pulled out his phone and showed me text messages from an unknown number, threatening to expose something about Jessica. He hadn't told her about them yet, hoping to figure out what was going on first. The messages were vague, but mentioned dates and times that coincided with Jessica's unexplained absences. That's when the pieces started falling into place. 3 weeks ago, I had seen Jessica coming out of a clinic on the other side of town, the same clinic where my friend Emily works as a nurse. When I texted Emily asking if she'd seen Jessica there, her response was odd. "I can't say anything, but your sister needs someone to talk to." I shared this information with Michael, watching as his face went pale. He admitted there was something else bothering him: large withdrawals from their joint account, always in cash, always on Thursdays. Jessica had explained them away as donations to Mom's cancer support group, But when Michael checked with the organization, they hadn't received any donations in months. As I sat there, absorbing everything Michael had told me, I made a decision that would come back to haunt me. I promised to help him figure out what was really going on with Jessica. Maybe I should have stayed out of it, minded my own business. But he wasn't just my brother-in-law anymore. Over the years, he had become a true friend. We spent the next hour brainstorming how to approach Jessica, completely unaware that someone had seen us together. Someone who would jump to all the wrong conclusions. Someone who would tell Jessica that her sister and husband were having a secret meeting. What I didn't know then was that Jessica had already constructed an entire narrative in her mind. A narrative where her younger sister, always the perfect one in their parents' eyes, was trying to steal her husband. A narrative that would lead her to commit an act of revenge so public, so devastating, that it would tear our family apart in ways I never thought possible. The next day, when Jessica asked to borrow my phone, I had no idea she had already seen the photos someone had sent her of our coffee meeting. No idea that she had spent the entire night convincing herself that the pregnancy she was hiding wasn't the real betrayal I was. Looking back, I should have noticed something was off about Jessica's demeanor when she showed up at my apartment unannounced yesterday. Her smile seemed forced, her movements too calculated. But I was distracted, still processing everything Michael had told me the day before, trying to figure out how to help my sister with whatever trouble she was in. Jessica was wearing the same emerald green dress she had worn to Mom's birthday last month. She looked pale, almost sickly, but I attributed that to whatever was causing her recent strange behavior. When she asked to borrow my phone, claiming hers was dead and she needed to make an urgent call to her doctor, I handed it over without a second thought. After all, what kind of person would suspect their own sister of plotting revenge? I went to the kitchen to make us some tea, giving her privacy for what I assumed was a medical call. That was my second mistake. The first had been not telling her about the coffee meeting with Michael right away. From the kitchen, I could hear her fingers tapping rapidly on my phone screen, but I didn't think anything of it. Maybe she was looking up the doctor's number, I thought. It wasn't until my phone started buzzing nonstop with incoming messages that I realized something was wrong. By the time I returned to the living room, Jessica was standing there with a triumphant look that made my blood run cold. My phone was still in her hand, screen lighting up every few seconds with new notifications. "Now everyone knows what kind of sister you really are," she said, tossing my phone onto the couch. The message she had sent to every single one of my contacts, family, friends, coworkers, even my boss at the kindergarten, was still open on the screen. "Hi everyone. I need to come clean about something. I'm pregnant with my sister's husband's baby. Jessica, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way, but Michael and I are in love. We've been seeing each other for months." The room started spinning. My entire world collapsed in those few seconds as I realized what she had done. But that wasn't even the worst part. She had also attached photos of Michael and me at the coffee shop, clearly taken from a distance, but angled in a way that made our innocent conversation look intimate. Someone had been watching us and had sent these photos to Jessica. My phone kept buzzing with responses. Shocked emoji reactions from friends. Messages of disappointment from family members. A formal text from my principal requesting an immediate meeting. Mom's name appeared on the screen with a simple, "How could you?" Dad's message was even shorter, "Call me." Now, through my tears, I tried to explain to Jessica about Michael's concerns, about the pregnancy test he had found, about the mysterious withdrawals from their account. But she just laughed, a cold, hollow sound that didn't belong to the sister I grew up with. Then she dropped another bombshell that made everything even more complicated. She was indeed pregnant, but the story behind her pregnancy was far more complex than any of us could have imagined. What she revealed next would not only change my understanding of the entire situation, but would also force me to make a decision that would either save our family or destroy it completely. As she stood there, one hand protectively over her stomach, she started telling me a truth so unexpected that it made her revenge plot seem almost secondary in comparison. My living room had become a battlefield, with Jessica and me on opposite sides of an invisible line. As my phone continued its relentless buzzing with incoming messages, she finally broke down and revealed the truth that would change everything. The reason for the clinic visits, the cash withdrawals, and her recent behavior was both simpler and more complicated than anyone could have guessed. Jessica had been secretly undergoing IVF treatments using a sperm donor. She hadn't told Michael because she knew it would crush him. His infertility diagnosis had already sent him into a deep depression. In her twisted logic, she thought she could pass the baby off as a miracle, giving Michael the child he desperately wanted. The cash withdrawals were for the treatments, paid in full to avoid any paper trail that Michael might discover. As she spoke, tears streaming down her face, I felt my anger being replaced by a mix of pity and horror. My sister, who had always been dramatic, had created an elaborate deception that was now spiraling out of control. The threatening texts Michael had received weren't from some mysterious blackmailer. They were from the clinic trying to reach Jessica about overdue paperwork. She had given them a burner phone number that she'd since abandoned. But now she had backed herself into an impossible corner. Her fake revenge plot against me had real consequences that couldn't be undone. My reputation was in tatters, my job was in jeopardy, and our family was being torn apart. And somewhere across town, Michael was about to discover he was going to be a father, just not in the way he thought. As if on cue, my apartment door burst open. Mom and Dad had arrived, their faces ashen with shock and disappointment. Mom looked like she had aged 10 years since I'd last seen her at Sunday dinner. Dad couldn't even look me in the eye. Behind them stood Michael, clutching his phone with white knuckles, the mass text clearly visible on his screen. The next few minutes were chaos. Mom started crying, asking where she had gone wrong with her daughters. Dad was uncharacteristically quiet, his silence more devastating than any words could have been. Michael stood frozen, looking between Jessica and me as if trying to solve a complex puzzle. That's when Jessica did something that made the situation even worse. Instead of coming clean, she doubled down on her lie. Through her tears, she started spinning a new tale about catching Michael and me together multiple times, adding details that never happened, making updates and locations. She was so convincing that even I almost believed her for a second. I watched in horror as she masterfully manipulated everyone's emotions, playing the role of the betrayed wife perfectly. With each word, she dug us all deeper into a hole that seemed impossible to escape from. But she didn't realize that her own deception was about to unravel in the most unexpected way. Just as Mom was demanding I pack a bag and leave town, just as Dad was calling our extended family to damage control, just as Michael was starting to question his own memory of events, my phone buzzed one final time. The message that appeared on my screen was from Emily, my nurse friend at the clinic. She had seen Jessica's mass text and couldn't stay silent any longer. What she was about to reveal would turn Jessica's carefully constructed house of cards into a spectacular disaster. My hands trembled as I opened Emily's message. The room fell silent, everyone's eyes fixed on me as I read it aloud. Rachel, I'm violating hospital policy by telling you this, but I can't let your sister destroy your life. Jessica has been coming to our fertility clinic for months, using a sperm donor for IVF. She forged Michael's signature on the consent forms. I have the documentation to prove it. I'm so sorry, but your sister needs help. The message included attached photos of the forged documents, with Michael's clearly faked signature. The dates matched perfectly with Jessica's cash withdrawals and mysterious appointments. As I looked up from my phone, the scene before me transformed into something out of a psychological thriller. Jessica's face drained of all color. She swayed slightly, her hands still protectively covering her stomach. Michael stepped forward, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning comprehension. The look he gave Jessica wasn't anger, it was pure devastation. Mom sank into my armchair, while Dad stood absolutely still, his earlier silence now charged with a different kind of tension. That's when Jessica did something none of us expected. She started laughing. Not her usual laugh, but a high-pitched, almost hysterical sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Through her laughter, she confessed everything, not just about the IVF and the forged signatures, but about her deeper motivations. She revealed that she had known about Michael's infertility even before they got married. A doctor had told her during a routine checkup, but she had hidden the results, convincing Michael to get tested only after their failed attempts at conceiving. She had watched him struggle with depression over his infertility, knowing all along that she had deceived him from the very beginning of their marriage. The fertility treatments weren't just about having a baby, they were her desperate attempt to fix a lie that had spiraled out of control. When she saw Michael and me at the coffee shop, her guilty conscience twisted it into something sinister. Convinced that we were somehow plotting to expose her, she had lashed out in the most destructive way she could think of. Mom, who had been quietly crying, suddenly stood up. For the first time in my life, I saw her look at Jessica not with her usual indulgent affection, but with something close to revulsion. Dad finally broke his silence, but his words weren't what any of us expected. He revealed something about our family history that cast Jessica's actions in an even more troubling light. Meanwhile, Michael had been quietly typing on his phone. Without saying a word, he turned the screen toward Jessica. On it was an email draft to the fertility clinic's ethics board, copying their legal department. Jessica's face crumpled as she realized that her scheme hadn't just destroyed her marriage, it could have serious legal consequences. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, Jessica clutched her stomach and crumpled to the floor. The stress had triggered something, and as Mom rushed to her side, she whispered something that made everyone in the room freeze. Even in this moment of crisis, my sister had one final twist to reveal, one that would force all of us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew about family, loyalty, and forgiveness. As Jessica lay on my living room floor, her words came out in a pained whisper that changed everything once again. The IVF treatments had failed. All of them. She wasn't actually pregnant at all. The positive pregnancy tests Michael had found were fake ones she had bought online, part of her desperate plan to buy more time for the treatments to work. The room spun with this new revelation. Mom's nursing instincts kicked in as she checked Jessica's pulse and called 911. But her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. Michael stood by the window, his shoulders slumped, looking out at nothing. The man I had seen just 2 days ago at the coffee shop, worried about his wife's suspicious behavior, now seemed to have aged a decade. Dad's reaction was the most surprising. He walked over to Jessica and knelt beside her, his voice soft as he shared something he'd never told us before. When he and Mom were first married, they had struggled with infertility too. He had considered using a sperm donor but couldn't bring himself to suggest it to Mom. Instead, they had waited, and eventually, through what doctors called a miracle, they had conceived Jessica. 2 years later, they had me. The irony of this revelation wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Jessica had gone to such extreme lengths to hide infertility issues, never knowing that her own existence was proof that miracles could happen. As the paramedics arrived and assessed her condition, the full weight of her actions began to sink in. My phone had finally stopped buzzing. The damage to my reputation was done, but somehow it didn't seem as important anymore. Emily had already sent a follow-up message saying she would formally report Jessica's document forgery to the clinic's board. She also offered to write a statement clearing my name, explaining that I had often accompanied Jessica to her appointments as moral support, another lie, but one meant to help repair the damage my sister had caused. As the paramedics prepared to take Jessica to the hospital, Michael made a decision that stunned us all. Despite everything she had done, the years of lies about his infertility, the forged documents, the failed IVF attempts, and the vicious attempt to destroy my reputation, he said he would ride in the ambulance with her. Not because he forgave her, he explained, but because he needed to understand why. He needed to hear the whole truth, with no more lies or manipulations. Mom went with them, leaving Dad and me alone in my apartment. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he pulled out his phone and started making calls, not to damage control this time, but to tell the truth. His first call was to my principal, explaining everything. His voice carried the weight of authority that had always made people listen to him, but now it also held a note of profound sadness. As I sat there listening to him defend me to the people Jessica had tried to turn against me, I realized something that would become crucial in the days ahead. Sometimes the truth isn't enough to heal the wounds caused by lies. The next few weeks would test our family in ways we never imagined, and Jessica's actions would have consequences that none of us could predict. A month has passed since that chaotic day in my apartment. Jessica spent 3 days in the hospital, not for any physical ailment, but for psychological evaluation. The doctors diagnosed her with severe anxiety and depression, stemming from years of hiding her knowledge about Michael's infertility and her subsequent desperate attempts to conceive through IVF. The fertility clinic launched a formal investigation into Jessica's forged documents. Emily's testimony was crucial. She provided evidence that not only cleared my name but also showed the extent of Jessica's deception. The clinic decided not to press charges, but Jessica has been permanently banned from their services. They also implemented stricter verification procedures for consent forms. Michael filed for divorce. The hardest part wasn't the legal proceedings, but watching him pack up their shared life into cardboard boxes. He still comes to our family dinners, though now they're held at Dad's house instead of their apartment. Mom insisted on keeping him in our lives, saying that family isn't just about blood. Jessica hasn't attended a dinner since that day, but she's starting to send tentative texts to our family group chat. My principal turned out to be more understanding than I expected. The kindergarten parents rallied behind me after Dad's explanation, with many sharing their own stories of family drama and false accusations. My students still greet me with the same innocent enthusiasm every morning, completely unaware of the adult chaos that had briefly threatened my career. Last week, I ran into Michael at our local grocery store. We talked for almost an hour in the frozen food aisle, our ice cream melting as he shared his plans to start a support group for men dealing with infertility. The experience with Jessica had shown him how many people suffer in silence, afraid to confront their struggles openly. He asked me to help organize their first meeting, and I agreed. Sometimes healing comes from helping others heal. Mom has been spending time with Jessica at her new apartment across town. According to her, Jessica is doing better with therapy and medication. She started journaling about her experiences, trying to understand her own actions. Yesterday, she sent me a letter, 20 pages of handwritten apologies and explanations. I haven't opened it yet. Some wounds need time before they can handle more words. Dad's revelation about their own fertility struggles has sparked ongoing conversations in our family about genetic heritage and what really makes a family. He and Mom are planning to share their story at Michael's support group, hoping their journey might help others find hope without resorting to desperate measures. As for me, I've learned that family secrets have a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply they're buried. The truth about Jessica's actions spread just as quickly as her lies had, thanks to social media and small-town gossip. But surprisingly, most people showed more compassion than condemnation once they understood the whole story. Emily recently suggested I should start a blog about sibling relationships and family crisis management. I laughed at first, but then I realized that our story, as bizarre as it seems, might help others navigating their own family dramas. Maybe that's how healing works, by turning our pain into something useful for others. Tonight, I received a text from Jessica. It was simple. Can we meet for coffee? The irony of her request isn't lost on me. Part of me wants to ignore it, to protect myself from any possibility of further drama. But another part remembers the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, seeking comfort from her big sister. I haven't replied yet. The truth is, I don't know if our relationship can ever return to what it was. Trust, once shattered, doesn't mend easily. But as I sit here with her letter still unopened on my coffee table, I realize that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or even reconciliation. Sometimes it just means accepting that people can do terrible things out of desperation and pain. Maybe that's the real lesson in all of this. Family isn't about perfection or even unconditional love. It's about choosing to remain connected, even when everything falls apart. It's about finding ways to rebuild, not necessarily what was lost, but something new from the pieces that remain. I might not be ready for coffee with Jessica yet, but I'm beginning to understand that healing, like family, is a journey rather than a destination.